1. The Forgotten Thrones of Africa. Imagine walking through the dusty corridors of history, flipping through pages filled with the names of kings, emperors, and conquerors. But somewhere between the lines are powerful women whose names were nearly erased, women who ruled empires, commanded armies, and shaped the destiny of nations. Their crowns were not just ornaments. They were symbols of authority, responsibility, and sometimes rebellion. Africa, the cradle of humanity, has birthed queens whose influence stretched beyond their borders, women whose decisions altered the course of history. They were warriors who met invaders on the battlefield, strategists who outwitted their enemies, and visionaries who transformed their kingdoms into centers of power and culture. Yet in many history books, their stories are barely mentioned, overshadowed by the men who stood beside them or the colonizers who rewrote their legacies. From the golden sands of ancient Egypt to the lush, green hills of Ethiopia, from the fortified cities of West Africa to the island palaces of Madagascar, these women lived lives of power, intrigue, and courage. Some ruled through diplomacy, others through fear, and some through love for their people so strong that they would risk everything to protect them. Today, we bring their voices back. These are not fairy tales. These are real stories, rich with victories and sacrifices. The women you are about to meet change the world, even if the world has forgotten their names. Prepare to be inspired. These are the queens of Africa, the untold stories of power, courage, and legacy. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because you won't want to miss the incredible true stories we're about to uncover. Now, let's step back in time and meet the queens of Africa. 2. Queen Nefertiti of Egypt. More than 3,000 years ago, in the heart of ancient Egypt, rose a queen whose very name means the beautiful one has come. Nefertiti is often remembered for her breathtaking beauty, immortalized in one of the most famous sculptures in the world. But behind that serene face was a mind as sharp as the desert sun and a will as unshakable as the Nile itself. She ruled alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten during one of Egypt's most radical eras. Together, they abandoned the old gods, angered the powerful priests, and declared worship of one deity, Aten, the sun disk. This bold move was nothing short of a religious revolution, shaking the very foundations of Egyptian society. But Nefertiti was no silent consort. In carvings and paintings, she is shown smiting enemies, leading ceremonies, and riding in royal chariot images normally reserved for kings. Some historians believe that after Akhenaten's mysterious death, Nefertiti may have ruled as pharaoh under a different name, keeping her grip on power in a time of uncertainty. The city they built, Akhetaten, was filled with art that captured the royal family's intimate moments. Nefertiti tenderly holding her children or standing proudly beside her husband as an equal. Yet, like her reign, the city eventually faded into the sands. Her tomb remains undiscovered, a mystery that still teases archaeologists. But her legacy endures, not just as Egypt's great beauty, but as the queen who dared to challenge centuries of tradition and, for a brief moment, rewrote the gods themselves. 3. Queen Makeda of Sheba. Long before the modern borders of Ethiopia and Yemen were drawn, there existed a kingdom so wealthy that its name still echoes through ancient tales, the Kingdom of Sheba. At its heart was Queen Makeda, a woman whose intelligence, charm, and ambition would secure her place in history and legend. The most famous story of Makeda comes from the Bible, the Quran, and Ethiopian tradition. Hearing of King Solomon's unmatched wisdom in Jerusalem, she set out on a journey across deserts with a caravan said to be miles-long camels laden with gold, spices, and rare treasures. But this was not merely a diplomatic visit. Makeda came to test the legendary king with riddles and questions that only the wisest could answer. When she finally stood before Solomon, their meeting became a blend of politics and mystery. Accounts differ on what happened between them, but one thing is certain. Makeda left with a deep respect for Solomon's wisdom and, according to Ethiopian tradition, she returned home carrying his child. That son, Menelik, would become the first emperor of Ethiopia's Solomonic dynasty, a line that claimed to descend from both Makeda and Solomon for centuries. Under her reign, Sheba flourished as a center of trade, connecting Africa, Arabia, and beyond. Her ships sailed across the Red Sea. Her caravans crossed dangerous deserts, and her court became a place where wealth and knowledge converged. Whether in scripture or history, Makeda remains a symbol of curiosity, diplomacy, and unmatched power, the queen who dared to challenge one of the wisest men in history and left a legacy still celebrated today. For Queen Amon-Irenas of Kush. In the 1st century BCE, the powerful kingdom of Kush thrived along the Nile, just south of Egypt. Its ruler, Queen Amon-Irenas, was no ordinary monarch. She was a fierce warrior, a shrewd strategist, and a leader whose courage would earn her a place among Africa's greatest defenders. When the mighty Roman Empire, under Emperor Augustus, expanded into Egypt, they turned their eyes southward toward Kush. Rome expected the Kushites to submit. Instead, they met Queen Amon-Irenas. She led her armies north, striking first with a bold invasion into Roman-controlled Egypt. Her forces captured key towns, destroyed statues of the emperor, and carried his bronze head back to Kush as a trophy. But Rome struck back with equal force. In the fierce battles that followed, Amon-Irenas is said to have lost one of her eyes, yet she continued to lead from the front. Her courage inspired her warriors to fight on, refusing to bow to the greatest superpower of the age. After years of conflict, the Romans realized conquering Kush would be far more costly than they had imagined. In a rare outcome for the time, peace negotiations were held, and Amon-Irenas secured a treaty that favored her kingdom. Rome withdrew, and Kush remained independent. The story of Amon-Irenas is one of resilience and defiance of a queen who proved that even the mightiest empire could be stopped. Today, she is remembered not for her beauty or wealth, but for her fearless spirit and her refusal to let her people be ruled by foreign powers. 5. Queen Amina of Zaza. In the 16th century, in what is now northern Nigeria, a young princess named Amina grew up with the heart of a warrior. She was the daughter of the ruler of Zaza, one of the great Hausa city-states. While other royal children were taught courtly manners, Amina mastered the sword, the spear, and the strategies of war. By her early 20s, she was already leading troops into battle, a rare sight in her time. When she became queen, Amina wasted no time in expanding her kingdom's influence. She led a series of military campaigns that stretched Zaza's borders far beyond their original reach, controlling trade routes that brought in wealth from across the region. She was so skilled in battle that neighboring states feared and respected her name. But Amina's legacy was not built on war alone. She ordered the construction of massive earthen city walls around her territory's fortifications, so impressive that many still stand today, known as Amina's Walls. These were not just for defense. They were symbols of strength, unity, and the stability she brought to her people. Legends say she never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to her kingdom and its expansion. Her reign transformed Zaza into a powerful trade and military hub, influencing the politics of West Africa for generations. Queen Amina remains a symbol of independence and strength, a leader who proved that women could rule not just from a throne, but from the front lines of battle. Her story still inspires warriors and leaders across Africa today. 6. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. In the early 1600s, the land now known as Angola was under threat from one of the most ruthless colonial powers of the age, Portugal. Into this storm stepped Queen Nzinga, a woman whose sharp mind and fearless presence would make her a legend in African resistance history. Nzinga first gained attention as a skilled negotiator. Sent to meet with the Portuguese governor to discuss peace terms, she walked into the meeting room to find no chair provided for her, a clear sign of disrespect. Without hesitation, she motioned to one of her attendants, who knelt down, allowing her to sit on his back. Eye to eye with the governor, Nzinga made it clear she was no subordinate. As the ruler of Ndongo and later Matamba, Queen Nzinga skillfully balanced diplomacy and warfare to protect her people. When negotiations failed, she personally led her armies into battle, forging alliances with neighboring kingdoms, escaped slaves, and even European rivals of Portugal. A brilliant strategist, she relied on guerrilla tactics to outsmart and outmaneuver colonial forces that were far better armed. For decades, Nzinga resisted Portuguese expansion, strengthening Matamba into a wealthy, independent state that traded with the outside world strictly on her terms. To the Portuguese, she was a relentless adversary. To her people, she was a fearless protector and a symbol of hope. Her passing in 1663 ended a remarkable reign, but her legacy of resistance endured for generations. Today, Queen Nzinga stands as one of Africa's most iconic leaders, a woman who wielded both intellect and courage to defend her kingdom's freedom. 7. Queen Yassaniwa of the Ashanti Empire. In 1900, the Ashanti Empire in present-day Ghana faced one of its greatest threats. The British, already seeking to tighten their control over the region, made a bold demand. They wanted the Golden Stool, the sacred throne that symbolized the soul of the Ashanti people. To them, it was just a royal artifact. To the Ashanti, it was the very heart of their nation. When the Ashanti leaders hesitated to act, one voice rose above the rest: Queen Mother Yassaniwa. Standing before the chiefs, she delivered a fiery speech that has echoed through time. If you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then we, the women, will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white men. We will fight until the last of US falls in the battlefields. Under her leadership, the Ashanti waged the war of the Golden Stool against the British. Yassaniwa was not content to stay in the background. She organized the defense, planned strategies, and inspired warriors to resist an empire. For months, her people held their ground, inflicting serious losses on the British forces. Eventually, she was captured and exiled, but her courage lit a fire in her people that would fuel the struggle for independence decades later. Today, she stands as a symbol of defiance, a reminder that leadership knows no gender. Yassaniwa proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon on the battlefield is not the sword, but the will to protect what is sacred even against the might of an empire. 8. Queen Nandi of the Zulu Kingdom. In the late 18th century, among the rolling hills of what is now South Africa, a young woman named Nandi faced a life of hardship. She was a single mother in a society where such a status often brought shame and struggle. But Nandi was no ordinary woman. She would become the mother of Shaka Zulu, one of the greatest military leaders Africa has ever seen, and the guiding force behind the rise of the Zulu Kingdom. From the moment Shaka was born, Nandi fought fiercely to protect him. Rejected by the father's family and cast out by her own, she endured years of poverty and humiliation. Yet she raised her son with discipline, resilience, and an unbreakable sense of pride. She taught him the values of leadership, strategy, and courage, lessons that would later shape him into a conqueror. When Shaka came to power, Nandi's influence did not fade. She became a trusted advisor and a respected figure in the Zulu court. Her wisdom often guided Shaka's decisions, and her presence reminded the kingdom of the sacrifices that had made its rise possible. Queen Nandi's story is one of endurance and quiet strength. She may not have ruled from a throne, but her guidance and determination shaped an empire that would dominate southern Africa for years to come. 9. Empress Teta Batul of Ethiopia. In the late 19th century, when European powers carved up Africa in the so-called Scramble for Africa, Ethiopia stood as one of the few nations to resist colonization. At the heart of that resistance was Empress Teta Batul, wife of Emperor Menelik II, a woman of sharp intellect, unshakable pride, and political genius. Teta was not content to simply play the ceremonial role of empress. She took an active hand in matters of state, advising her husband, influencing court politics, and even challenging foreign diplomats. When the Italians attempted to trick Ethiopia into signing a treaty that would make the country their protectorate, Tata saw through the deception immediately. She refused to accept the false terms and rallied the court against the agreement. But her influence was not limited to diplomacy. During the lead-up to the Battle of Adwa in 1896, the decisive confrontation with Italy, Tata commanded troops, organized supply lines, and personally led a contingent of warriors to the front. Empress Tata Batul's legacy is that of a protector of Ethiopia's independence, its dignity, and its future. She showed that wisdom and courage, when joined, can stop even the most powerful invader in their tracks. 10 Queen Ranavalona, one of Madagascar. In the early 19th century, the island of Madagascar stood at a crossroads. European powers were expanding their influence across Africa, and missionaries, traders, and soldiers were making their way to its shores. In 1828, Ranavalona ascended to the throne, a queen whose reign would become one of the most controversial in African history. Ranavalona was determined to keep Madagascar free from foreign control. She distrusted European influence, especially the growing power of Christian missionaries. Almost immediately, she began reversing treaties with France and Britain, expelling most foreigners and reasserting traditional Malagasy laws and customs. Her rule was marked by strict policies and harsh punishments for those who defied her authority. While her methods earned her the nickname the Mad Queen among Europeans, many of her actions were driven by a desire to protect her kingdom from colonization. She promoted self-sufficiency, encouraging her people to rely on their own skills and resources rather than foreign goods. Ranavalona also strengthened Madagascar's military, using it to enforce her policies and maintain order across the island. However, her reign was not without hardship. Forced labor, executions, and isolationist policies caused suffering for many. Yet, despite her brutality, she succeeded in one remarkable achievement. During her 33-year reign, Madagascar remained independent, resisting the colonial domination that consumed much of Africa. When she died in 1861, foreign powers quickly moved to re-establish influence over the island. But Ranavalona's legacy remains fiercely debated. Was she a cruel despot or a patriotic defender of her nation's sovereignty? Perhaps she was both. What is certain is that she left an indelible mark on Madagascar's history.